What's next for IT? In today's economy, technology touches every aspect of the day-to-day operations of business. There has never been more pressure on IT to deliver for our organizations. So what can we expect over the next decade? We need to think differently about how we approach our work to continue to thrive into the future. This requires all of us to be intentional in how we look at our role going forward. Smart IT is an approach to getting the important things done by transforming the way we think, work, and lead. And now, let's disrupt the status quo, simplify the complex, and reduce risk the smart IT way. Welcome, everyone, to another episode of the Smart IT Podcast. I'm your host, William Reed. And today, I have Harsha on the show. Love to have CIOs on the show. They're at the forefront of the business and technical intersection, leading IT teams to make technology work for their businesses. So I'm pretty excited about talking to Harsha today. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, William. Glad to be here. Looking forward to the conversation.
So Harsha, we met over at SIM Austin, right? So the Society of Information Management. So we got an Austin chapter here. So I met you, and at one of our events, I was just chatting with you, and then we're talking about some of the opportunities and challenges and kind of day-to-day of a life of a CIO at your organization. So I said, you know what, I got to reach out to you and get you onto the show as a host, as a guest. So I'm pretty excited about chatting with you today.
Pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me again.
Okay. So I guess we should start a little bit early on. So how did you get into this role as CIO? I know everybody have their own kind of origin story of their journey through IT and kind of getting into this seat. So we can start there.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, I can tell you straight out of the bat that it is not a role that I plan to be in, or I worked, had a structure in how I was going to path into this role. It just happened through a multitude of situations and, being at the right place at the right time. And then, of course, being open to opportunities and taking on the challenges as they came about. So, I first became a CIO when I was actually 32 years old, so rather young, and it was just a pretty opportunistic situation where the company that I was in prior to my current role, they went through Chapter 11. The company got split into two different departments or two different operations, and CIO at that point in time moved to the manufacturing side of the business and the retail side of the business. They needed a CIO, and I was the director of project management. So in that role, I literally had oversight for all of the key initiatives that we were executing in that company. And when this opportunity came about, I took on the challenge, and it was pretty fascinating and exciting, and definitely a nervous time when you first get into the role. But yeah, since then you learn and you work your way, make sure you got the right team and the right support structure and the right mentors. And here we are now, 18, 19 years later, being the CIO. Looks like I'm still learning every day and continuing to be a better person and a better CIO.
Well, I love what you said right there about that kind of learning, because it's like lifelong learning, right? So it's not a day to go by. You're not picking up some new type of skill, learning some new insights on how people work, how to get people to collaborate, understanding problems and working solutions. So one of the things we like to talk about in the Smart IT Podcast is this concepts of teamwork and learning, kind of learning how things work. So let's talk about, I guess let's start there with teaming here. You've been in the field for a while. When you look at your team, how do you approach, getting everybody to work on the same page, respecting everybody's opinions, getting everybody on the same page to kind of maximize what you guys can provide to the business?
Yeah, absolutely. No, I mean, I always tell my team my success is dependent on their success. So it is in my best interest to really help and manage my team and support them to be successful because, as I believe that if if they succeed, I succeed. So to that effect, first and foremost is that when I hire people, we're bringing. I'm going to talk about kind of bringing in experienced folks or people in the leadership roles first, and then I can speak to maybe the philosophy that we take when we are bringing the staff and the team members within the organization. So as far as leadership roles go, first and foremost for me, it's really the fit is can I see myself working with the person? Because as we go through the interviews and selection process, we have established that the individuals that are applying have the basic skills and experience that we're looking for. So that's kind of out of the way. And really what is important for success is understanding how they fit into our organizational culture, how their work styles align to perhaps my own work style, and it doesn't have to align, but it has to be complementary, right? So their strengths
Yeah,
has to be my weaknesses, and my strengths have to be their
yeah,
weaknesses, so we can support each other and move along. And we work on the understanding that I'm bringing somebody because I believe they are the expert and they're the right person to do the job at hand. And so, in many ways, I look at them as my advisors. And so, I want to listen to what they have to say in their respective areas, in their respective domains, and help me kind of strategize how that would scale up at the enterprise organizational level. So, in other words, you bring the right people, make sure they're the right fit, and get away, right? Really let
nice,
them do what they are supposed to do and how they need to do it. We are aligned on what the end state is, what the goals and objectives that we're trying to accomplish. So you give them that vision, give them that goal, and then let them take it to the finish line.
I love that. It's almost like you kind of orchestrator. You can conduct same piece of music, but you have different people, different instruments. They already know technically what their skill set is for that instrument. Get that buy-in. That we're gonna have some beautiful music when we start to work together.
That's the hope. I mean, in every once in a while you get a mistune, and that's just we're all humans. We're
Yeah,
gonna make that
yeah,
wrong hire, or something doesn't work out as we want it to. But I think the other important thing, and this is kind of I'll also speak to kind of the staff positions as well. Um, the objective with both the leadership and staff, the other important thing is really helping them understand the big picture, right? How is their individual contribution really impacting the business? So we particularly this is something that was important to me in my younger days as an individual contributor, and it's also very important to me today in my role because everything that I am responsible for and my team is responsible for has to support the overall business, has to support our customers' experience, has to support the growth opportunities that we're exploring. So we can't really be in a silo. And if that is really the model in which we are operating, then the question really becomes how do we take that to the individuals on the team and really help them understand how their individual contribution really impacts the big picture and the business directly. So I believe in just creating that transparency with our team. So if somebody on my team came up with a great idea, we just bring them to the presentation and have them speak to it with the leadership team. So give them the exposure to their contribution, give them the recognition to their contribution, and really empower them to do what is of value to the organization without any kind of hierarchy or bureaucracy in how that work gets done. So that's to me a very important aspect to help people understand that their ideas are welcome, that they are empowered to do more than what is on the job description, if you will, and
nice.
that when they do that, that they're also recognized and acknowledged for their work, and we give them the visibility that they deserve.
And that's so critical, right? Your voice matters, and you reinforce that the acknowledgement. Like, you didn't go in the side room, get this idea, run with it to the business, say, "Hey, look what I came up with." It's no, let that person get out in front, practice their communication skills, express their ideas, and let the teammates see that. So yeah, I definitely love that.
Absolutely, yeah.
So it's interesting though. So we talk about this big picture here. So let's talk about this. I know we talked about this in our conversation previously, it was a couple months ago, about kind of having that viewpoint always on the business and the customers. So let's talk about this. Now, even the next generation, next 10 years or so, all CIOs have to be locked in on this. But I don't think there's really been a place where IT has not really been, let's go do something cool over here, completely separate from what the business does. So let's talk about this full integration with the business and what they do.
Yeah, earlier in my career, when when I was became a CIO, there was a lot of conversation about IT business alignment, and the very point that the conversation was about, hey, IT and business can be like two different entities. We got to align ourselves in terms of what we do. And I think those days are long gone. In the digital economy that we are in today, technology is and should be on the forefront of every business strategy, right? So it's no longer about IT business alignment. It's really more about technology integration into the business, and technology enablement of the business, and technology enabled growth of the business. Because there's not anything that I am aware of in our environment that does not need some kind of a technology to run or operate, or just do basic day-to-day stuff. So when that is the case, as technology teams and as a leader of the technology function, um, I'm not going to be talking about technology per se. I don't care if the Gen AI is the latest buzz or blockchain is the latest buzz. My point of view has to be aligned to, well, as a technologist, I have to be aware of what's going on in the marketplace and what the emerging technologies are. So that's like one part of my responsibility and my team's responsibility. But the other part of the responsibility is really to understand, how does that fit or apply to our business? How can I leverage this technology and generate or create value within the business for our associates, for our customers? And for us to be able to do that, I have to have a very intimate understanding of our overall business process. Because I can't come up with an idea if I have no clue as to how things work, or where there might be an opportunity. So I have to be really engaged with the business. And in many ways, I see the role of the CIO as really a business strategist that is highly competent in the technology. And so that's the view I take, and um, it really is become a necessity, in my view, with today's CIOs. And I say CIOs, but honestly, every member of the IT team, because this goes back to my point. If you have to um, know what your contribution and how it's going to affect the overall business, then again, you have to understand what is the business, and how can you come up with ideas on your own if you have no idea of what the business is, or what the specific challenges or opportunities are. So we want to democratize the idea of coming up with innovation and coming up with idea as a more natural state of being in the technology function, as opposed to a carved out function that says, oh, here's the R&D or the innovation function, and then the rest of it are like, okay, we don't have to innovate, we can kind of do things. So I don't believe in that idea. I feel like every individual in the technology space has to always wear kind of that innovator's hat, and in the context of the business, continue to innovate.
Yeah, I love that. And it's everybody's looking, not only what the business does, but what do the operations look like? What does the process look like? So if you want to come up with some new interesting tech that you just heard about, learned about, that in your mind, you start to think of different ways it might integrate into that business process.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think the other important role is really to be able to decipher, hype versus substance, right? Because the market and the press loves to hype as new and emerging technologies come about, right? I've seen this many, many times through the course of my years in this space. And so, whether it's, metaverse last year or blockchain the year prior to, or Gen AI, I mean, there's always a flavor or two every year of what the new buzz is. But then there are some legitimate, promising technologies, but in sometimes it's new, but it's unproven, and it may just be a hype, and so
Yeah.
we have to take the leadership role within the organization to help clarify that and have a point of view for the business, right? So to kind of use that as an example today, it is my role to help the organization have a position on how we leverage generative AI or not, for that matter.
Nice.
And then it's not something that I would make a call on or make a decision on, but I have to lead that effort and facilitate a dialogue and help educate the organization, the leadership team, to say, what is Gen AI? How can it help? Here's kind of where my thoughts are. Is this something we want to explore? Is this something we don't want to explore? What is our position on this? So I have to initiate that dialogue and conversation within the organization to really help bridge the gap between kind of the cutting edge buzz and hype that we see in the headlines to, how do we take that at, as it applies to us and at face value, and not necessarily, you've heard the phrase FOMO, right? Fear of missing out. So,
Yes.
So we want to address the FOMO effect, right? Because there are always parts of the organization where they feel like, oh my gosh, we're falling behind, and as and when appropriate and where appropriate, we have to make sure that nobody is responding to or pursuing something because of FOMO.
Yeah, it's almost like you got to find out where the business people traveling to, what type of conferences are they going to, what are they listening to? Because they come back on Monday morning, they've heard something, they've seen something, and you almost got to be ready. Like, I'm here to help translate, and I like the words you used earlier.
Yeah,
facilitate that conversation, right? So you can let them see a lot, but you want to help formulate, kind of explore, provide insight, provide clarity. So I love that as your role, what you're taking on there.
Yeah, but another aspect, and this is obviously much closer to you as well, is security. And as enterprises and organizations continue to digitize almost 100% of their business operations and interactions, the attack surface and the threat vectors also continually expand. And so you are faced with this dual challenge of, on one hand, you are trying to accelerate and expand on the use of technologies. On another hand, you are in parallel expanding your attack surface and threat vectors. So it is, earlier I said, with almost every business being so reliant on technologies, but also the flip side of that is that we're also exposing ourselves to more threats, digital threats.
Yeah, it kind of points out the criticality of having sound principles and practices. So, business have been managing risk since the beginning of time, right?
Yeah.
So it's like some companies who maybe have an immature risk management process where risk perception is kind of shaky. Somebody overrode something without really having true due diligence there, or looking at all the facts. It can be problematic when you insert a new emergent tech.
Yeah.
and you can be further behind than your competitors. So I've always encouraged everybody to make sure they have sound risk management process across the board. So you don't bring AI out and then somebody said, but we don't know what our assets are. Well, when you bought it, like the business bought something,
Correct.
they should keep track of it, right?
Yeah.
An inventory of it.
Exactly.
So as you look at the end of the year, heading to 2024, if your asset inventory got a problem, define a specific process, plan, and initiative to address that now, right?
Correct.
To have visibility across your infrastructure. So it shouldn't be new things that all of a sudden generative AI is being held up because we're missing the principle. So can you talk about this embedded nature of the business and tech? Let's also talk about this embedded nature of managing cyber risk embedded across the board.
Yeah, I might want to hear from you on that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it definitely is a challenge. In fact, I was listening to a presentation yesterday with some of the newer enforcement that the SEC is trying to do with regards to, the conviction, or I don't know if they convicted like this CISO of SolarWinds. And I think I saw there was, this is not SEC, but there was some accountability on Uber's CISO. So certainly now, security is starting to become a main point of stability and or health of companies. And what I found interesting is that, the Department of Defense and all the other alphabet soups themselves are getting exploited and hacked, yet, which with unlimited resources and all kinds of, capabilities that they might have, yet they're also enforcing, other organizations that may not have all of the resources that they do for any events and breaches. So it's a very interesting time in our lives where individuals are being held accountable, and it could be the CISO, it could be the CEO, it could be the board even, and absolutely we have to look at enterprise security risk as an enterprise risk and not an IT problem or IT responsibility, and really do our part in keeping the organization and the leadership informed of what our risks are. One of the things that I have found, even within my own teams and in my experience, is that specific to security, we like to talk about all the cool tech that we have. We have, sophisticated EDR, we have, sophisticated real-time firewalls. So what I see is we tend to speak about all the controls that we might have, more so than the effectiveness of those controls. And so I'm starting to really help my team change that narrative on what we communicate. I don't care if you're an EDR. I want to know if we have 100% of our portfolio on EDR, and that the EDR is up to date on the version. So things like that. So we have to shift from saying, oh, here are the 8 or dozen different tools and technologies that we have, to really helping the organization be aware of what is the effectiveness of our cyber risk management, and where are our gaps, as we know, and where are the opportunities, and what's kind of our roadmap to help address that. It's also important to understand that sometimes we cannot always put a control because of business reasons or business needs. That is a risk that we are accepting, right, as a business, as a company. And that has to be not a decision made by one department or one team. That has to be a CEO down understanding of the risk, and that we are saying, we have two options. We can either apply a control and impede the business, or we have to accept the risk and let the business flow smoothly. So it's a decisions that we have to bring to the highest level within the organization. And the key takeaway for me is that cybersecurity is not an IT problem; it is an enterprise risk, and has to be everybody's responsibility.
Yeah. And I like what you said before about very well funded organizations like the Department of Defense still getting hacked,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And then we talk about like developing safe code, and if we think about somebody like Microsoft, right,
Yeah.
who's spending billions and billions of dollars, and they shift to left, right? Because you probably heard this, right?
Yeah.
You got to shift left to be more secure. But what do we do every month?
Yeah.
We take cycles to go patch Microsoft on new vulnerabilities from an organization spending billions of dollars have already shifted left.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, right. So now start to think about, okay, that's the true nature of risk management, right?
Yeah.
Even if you're thinking about like if you hired more police officers on the streets, would crime ever go away? No. The U.S. spends almost a quarter of its entire budget on defense. Doesn't mean you're going to stop wars, right?
Exactly.
So at some point, that perspective, we got to run business, we got to live. So this whole managing the risk, which business has been doing because before the beginning of the time, is managing risk as you go out and do what you need to go do. So if that's serving up your customers, building revenue, and sustaining itself, I think that perspective really helps out, which goes back to how do you communicate to the business? So how well is security working? You can say, as well as that new marketing campaign you just did.
Exactly.
So going back to your point, how do you test that the marketing campaign works? How do you know the security program works? You have some way to test it. So my favorite thing is the website looks great. The email looks fantastic. The sales team had practiced it. And then somebody asked the question, by the way, that leading to new revenue or new customers. So what do you mean?
Exactly.
That's where you check it, right?
Yeah.
So for security, it means we have 100% coverage on assets that we bought.
Yeah.
So if we spin up a container and a VM or server, we can keep track of it. And then we can use the word adequate, but it's like based off what you've given us, what we say, what our controls look like, we'll test it. And we'll tell our external stakeholders, get pretty decent security based off, other industries. We do pretty well. So we get into trouble when we oversell what we're doing. Another $3 million. We're going to lock this down for those adversaries.
Yeah. It's funny you mentioned marketing. There's a famous quote. I don't recall who actually said it. It says something like, "I know 50% of my marketing budget works. I don't know which 50%." So, we can't afford to say the same in security or technology, right? Well, I spent $10 million. I don't know. I know 5 million of that works somewhere, but I don't know which 5 million. Right? It's not something that we have the luxury to say that. But I think the key is really. You said adequate, and that's a good word, but who determines what is adequate, right? So it's even coming to consensus on that is something that most companies don't do. It's like the CIOs or whoever the heads the security responsible for security might come up with some. Aspects of what they want to do along security in terms of investments or choice of technologies. Either they're going to be driving that based on available budget, or they're going to be driving that based on their own perception of what adequate is, which I believe is not, in my view, the right way to do it, because that adequacy has to be, again, if it is an enterprise problem, that has to come from either I have to be able to articulate saying, here's our risk, cyber risk, and here's the dollars I need to fix it, or here's the dollars I have, and here's the risk that I can mitigate, and here are the risks that we're continuing to be exposed. So if I don't have the conversation with the leadership in those terms, it becomes, a funnel of tools, or a funnel of investment in tools that truly does not help inform or educate the business in terms of what their true cyber risks are, or what are we vulnerable to or exposed to, and what are we actually managing on a daily basis.
Well, one good thing is we know most of the breaches in the headlines follow some common patterns. A lot of times it's the way companies are responding to it that are getting them into trouble.
Yeah.
Right. They're either overselling it, underselling it. But the one thing you can have is like bad process. So user just left the company 3 weeks ago, but their credentials are still active. Well, we're going to say that's not adequate. And if you say that a lot, people are going to start nodding their heads like, yeah, that wasn't great.
Yeah.
We have a SIM. It just doesn't have coverage over 100% of the assets. It covers on-prem 100%, but only 20% of the cloud presence.
Exactly.
Now, if you say that out loud, it's like, that's not going to be adequate.
Correct.
We have 1 million alerts that come in every day, and we can't actually analyze it.
Yeah.
Okay, can we improve? So if you had that problem 3 years ago, and we come back 3 years from now, and you still have 1 million alerts that you can't look at, it's like, you actually got better at some point.
Correct.
And I think in other industries and other areas of business, they do a very good job of improving their process over time. And it looks like it's solid. It was thought brought into it. It has some rigor to it. And when they look at it, it's like, say, that's a good process, right?
Correct. Yeah.
I think in security, we've fallen on saying this is an advanced adversary, and then saying, well, we didn't scan this segment of the network. We didn't know about it. Well, why didn't you know about it?
Yeah.
And it was exposed for 6 months. Those type of stories, when you read the breach write-up, is where it's like, that doesn't look right.
Correct.
As opposed to, you should know how it should sound, right?
Yeah.
Advanced adversaries over a period of time got some data. But you told the business, we have insurance, we have a incident response plan, we practice it. Board of directors has gone through that practice. We're back up within our well-defined SLA. We're still working and still business up and running.
Yeah.
We're resilient, right?
Exactly.
There
are a couple of things. Sorry to interrupt. I didn't mean to interrupt. A couple of things you mentioned that I think really resonates with me. One is just the idea that you talked about all the headlines and you talked about process. So how do we learn from others' mistakes? There's nothing more satisfying and fulfilling than learning from others' mistakes, if we have the opportunity to do that, right? And so you see all the headlines, you see all the outages, you see all the breaches. How many companies or how many technology departments actually review that and say, could that happen to us? And
good point.
And what is it that we should be thinking about or doing to prevent that from happening to us? And it comes back to process again. So even bringing other breaches and other reports and having a conversation about it within our own teams and say, is this something that could happen to us? Is a great question to mitigate something that we know. Because in this space, there's a lot of unknown unknowns, I guess is the term that we typically use. Yeah. So the more we are able to use cases is the term that comes to my mind. If the more use cases we're able to test and validate based on somebody else's learnings, to me that is there's nothing more better than taking advantage of that.
Yeah, it goes back to the learning organization, right? Learning organization, learning team.
Exactly.
So if you're a CEO today, you should have practiced what it sounds like to go up to the podium and talk about a breach, right? Have you seen your fellow CEOs have to do it?
Correct.
So then you ask the question back to Harsha, do we have a complete inventory of everything the CFO spent money on? If you say no, can you fix it? So if we go back to the next board meeting, we'll say, Harsha, have we closed that gap yet? Not yet. What's holding you out?
Yeah.
Now, if we go through another 2 budget cycles, then something's wrong, right?
Exactly.
So we should be able to, on the basics, knowing what we have, how we do our prioritization, and we learn from everybody else. We didn't automate some playbooks. This is what we're going to do. And then certain things we're just going to accept.
Yeah.
And then the chief legal is going to be comfortable with what we accept. IT is going to be comfortable. The business is going to be comfortable. It's like, we feel good if something happens. We can go back to our stakeholders. We can post on the line to our customers. This is what we've done. This is what happened. We're going to keep doing business and keep getting better. So no one has to do the blame game, right? Like, oh my God, IT had to write a nasty email that got subpoenaed that said, the business, they won't fix this. They won't give me money to go fix this tool, or we need this tool. So it's like, let's bring it out in the open, because we have a lot of case studies. You got organizations like the Center for Internet Security. They've actually did a study of thousands of breaches over the years. what controls work the best in actual live attacks.
Right.
From cyber nation state actors, from hacktivists, you name it. They looked at their tactics, their techniques, their procedures, and it has these commonalities to it. So they put it based off like how much you need to invest in things like endpoint control, cloud security tools. And then, of course, you have a huge community who just share knowledge, right?
Correct.
So along you're a learning organization, maybe go through one budget cycle, two budget cycles, but the fundamentals should be in place there, right? We're powering global economic activity on this planet. Some of these basics should just be taken care of, just a part of doing business.
Exactly. Great point. Yeah, you're absolutely right. It's just there's so much resources available out there. Verizon releases an annual report called the Verizon Data Breach Report (DBIR) or something, and it's all the ones that we see the headlines of, but it's also the ones that actually don't make it to the headline. It's just there's so much learning, and it's free. I mean that report is a comprehensive report that they publish. It's a joint effort between all the government agencies, private agencies. It's for those those that haven't looked at it or seen it. It's a great resource to go find. It's a free download. They release it every year, and they talk about all the hundreds of cases that they have investigated globally, and you can kind of see snippets or nuggets of the patterns that are out there and how breaches happen. Even if you are able to take care of one or two of those situations, you are already better off than you were before.
So I guess that's one of the things, the challenge for CIO, right? So they're keeping the lights on, make sure all the systems run. We're trying to do new business innovation, and we're trying to keep the bad guys out. So it's a lot on your plate. So as my audience is listening to this Harsha and thinking about, what, I may be in a specific area of my organization today, but one day I aspire to be a CIO. Any thoughts you can give to this person thinking about that career path, different skill sets they can think about, honing over the next couple of years to kind of get to that role? Anything you can share would be very beneficial.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I can share my experience, and I can also share how I coach my team on this as well. First and foremost, I think we started off with this comment. It's you have to be curious, and that means you are always asking the questions before you come up with an answer, right? Because historically, when technology teams respond to the business, we are typically responding to a request, right? Hey, we want a new CRM, or we want a new reporting platform. So somebody is, in my view, that is somebody coming up with a solution for us to implement. So I would start with asking, can you help me define the problem? What are we trying to solve? So be curious all the time. Ask questions, right? Before we say, okay, let's go do an RFP for a reporting platform. Let's understand what are we trying to accomplish as a business. And again, I am talking to you from a CIO perspective, but this is really one of those characteristics, if you will, that kind of really helps you kind of grow in your career, because you're continually asking questions. And I'd say questions not in the sense of challenging somebody, but questions in terms of clarifying the need, right? And once you do that, then you bring your own expertise and your knowledge to say, oh, I understand you're asking us to go, look up a reporting solution, but how about we take advantage of this newer technology that might be out there? So you're now coming up with a solution based on a true understanding of a problem, as opposed to a response to a request. You see what I'm saying?
Yes.
So I think, to me, that's where one of the characteristics is: be curious. The second thing that I would say is that you have to continually expand your horizon of responsibilities. So when I started my career, I was a developer, and then, as I was working as a developer, I started to thread into databases, and I learned databases. At some point, I became pretty good in databases, and I moved into operating systems. I became an OS engineer, and then it started to get into more the total stack systems engineers. So you continually expand to adjacent functions or adjacent skills, and that way you're also broadening your own sense of what is the breadth of skills that you bring in. You don't have to be an expert in everything, but you have a reasonable understanding to really create an impact. You kind of broaden your horizon, broaden your perspective on how you approach certain things. And then last but not the least is really relationships. And I use that term in a broad sense. I mean, relationships apply to teams. You work effectively with teams. You help out from teams. You learn from teams. Relationships will come to play when you are negotiating something with anybody. Whether it's your own pay, or whether it's your own the work that you have to do, or the prioritization of work that you have to do, or negotiating just the competing demands within the organization, or negotiating a point of view. So I think the more stronger your relationships are, the easier those conversations tend to be, because otherwise, part of some of the things that I see or I've seen, conflict comes into play when people disagree, mostly when they don't know each other as individuals, right? So if I always use the analogy with my team, like if your best buddy calls you something, you probably laugh about it and you move on. But if a stranger calls you that, your emotions are triggered. And so the only difference there is the relationship that you have with your buddy, and the lack of relationship with the stranger. Yeah. So you don't want to be a stranger within your own organization or your own team. The more you have that relationship, the easier it is to work through conflicts, navigate the challenges that you run into on a day-to-day basis. And by doing that, you also become somebody that people are willing to go to, because they know you are able to manage complex projects. You are able to get the job done. You are able to lead the team. So by building relationships, you inherently kind of develop those skills where you can get more responsibility, because people start to see that you're able to work through those impediments that come in most people's way.
I think the next 10 years are going to be very exciting for a lot of IT professionals as they kind of move up the ranks, kind of expand their responsibilities, look at all the interesting new and emerging things to do. So great insights from you, Harsha. Really appreciate your time today.
Oh, thanks for having me, William. It was great talking to you, and hopefully your audience will find something interesting here.
All right. Really appreciate that. And we're signing off again for another episode of the Smart IT Podcast. If you want more information, go to williamreed.info. Until the next episode, take care. Thanks for joining another episode of the Smart IT Podcast, where we explore what's next for IT and disrupt the status quo, simplify the complex, and reduce risk together. If you like what you hear, please like, subscribe, and leave your comments. And for more Smart IT wisdom, check out my website at williamreed.info.